Closing arguments are set for this morning in a Manhattan courtroom. That's where a jury will decide whether former President Trump will have to pay even more money to a writer who says he ruined her reputation. The former president briefly testified in his own defense on Thursday, very briefly.
National correspondent Mara Sirianni explains what happened and what's next. Hey, Mara.
Yeah, she's seeking more than $10 million, so we will see what the jury has to say about that. But Trump took the stand to deny he tarnished Carroll's reputation after she accused him of sexual assault, but his testimony, was stopped short by the judge after Trump failed to follow the rules of what he could say on the stand. So before the jury was brought in, Trump's legal team went back and forth with Judge Lewis Kaplan about what the former president was actually allowed to say during his testimony. Judge Kaplan voiced concerns that the former president would make false statements about the first E. Jean Carroll trial, in which a jury did find him liable for sexual abuse and defamation. Now, as Trump's team again went back and forth with the judge, Trump is depicted in these courtroom sketches you see here as seemingly annoyed, shaking his head, and he was even heard at one point on a hot mic claiming once again that he never met Carroll. So Trump also said he stood behind the deposition played for the jury where he called Carroll a whack job, further stating he never instructed anyone to hurt her and that he was simply defending himself against the allegations that he considered to be false. That's a direct quote there. He was then cut off after, like we said, about 2 minutes. So Carroll again is seeking more than $10 million in damages over comments Trump made about her while he was president. The writer said Trump raped her in a dressing room in the 90s, and Trump said Carroll made it all up to sell her memoir. Also taking the stand Thursday for the defense, this woman, Carroll's friend, Carol Martin. Now, Martin was asked to explain text messages she wrote calling E. Jean Carroll a narcissist and saying she was suspicious of her motives. While on the stand, Martin said she wishes to take back those comments. So again, Trump has already been found liable for sexual abuse and defamation. The jury now has to decide how much more money he is owed to Carroll. Back to you.
All right, national correspondent Mara Sirianni reporting for us. Thank you. Wendy Patrick is a career trial attorney and legal analyst. She joins us this morning from Los Angeles. Thank you so much for your time this morning. So Donald Trump was only on the stand for a few minutes, once again just denying the accusations. So what impact could his testimony have on this second defamation trial?
Well, you're right when you say, again, denying accusations. I mean, you know, it's not every day that we wait so long to hear him say so little. There were many that were surprised that he wasn't allowed to say more. But when you really go back to what this trial is about, it's not about liability. As you mentioned, that's already been established. It's about how much money is he going to owe? However, the argument on the other side of that is this is really a courtroom campaign. He actually has taken breaks from his real campaigning on the campaign trail to attend a trial that he's not legally bound to be at. I mean, he has to be at his criminal trials. He doesn't have to be at his civil trials. The fact that he chooses to show up and chose to take the stand is in and of itself something that's, you know, I think very telling of who he is. His identity is often tied up more as the blue-collar businessman that gets him all the votes that it does than it is in a lot of these criminal trials that he just consistently refers to as witch hunts. But I do have to say that's also what he called this one today, muttering under his breath at the table.
But, I mean, listen, if you believe the narrative, which seems to be true, that an indictment bump, that he has done better politically because of all of the legal troubles, then you can see why he takes advantage of all those cameras outside of a courtroom to kind of further his campaign. It makes sense in the political realm. Back in the legal realm, though, Trump is a tough client, and he's tough on the stand. Does he do himself any favor at all by muttering, by not following the judge's rule? We saw it in the civil fraud trial, also in New York. We're seeing it in this one as well, because you are essentially insulting and or disobeying the very people who are going to be deciding your legal and financial fate.
Well, that's true in a sense. Remember, it's going to be up to the jury, and that's really his audience in this particular trial. But you said something that I want to expand on that's very important. You talk about whether or not he always helps himself with all these criminal trials and all the allegations. Remember that a lot of people that have been polled coming out of New Hampshire and Iowa have been very clear that they're big Trump supporters, but that they might not be as likely to support him were he to be convicted of a crime. Now, here we're talking about a civil matter, but it's still the same type of thing because remember, the former president lumps them all together, as do many members of the public that have a hard time keeping straight what trial is about what. So in terms of him not following instructions, that may play well to a base that doesn't think this trial is fair to begin with. And that is the base that he's playing to. And if you look at some of the exit polls, if those are to be trusted, that's a large swath of his support. So yes, he may believe it's to his advantage to continue to defend himself, even as you heard, when that's not part of the analysis this jury is going to be considering, because the larger audience is the American people.
And just real quick, that may be true if there's an actual conviction, but as a reminder, he's already been found liable for sexual assault and defamation. In the civil fraud trial in New York, the judge has already said, I think your business was a fraud. So those aren't convictions per se, but he's in legal trouble. Those decisions have already been made, and that didn't hurt him, at least in the first two contests. So we'll see if a conviction really does. But go ahead.
And his exchanges with...
Those are civil trials. I think there may be a difference for the general electorate. There may be a difference between civil liability, which is what this trial is about, and criminal liability. So, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully the voters can tell the difference.
Fair enough.
And again, this is the second defamation trial, and that is because he continues to target E. Jean Carroll. If you look at his social media feed on Truth Social, it is filled with posts attacking her, trying to undermine her credibility at times. Could that even be used for a third and fourth? Could this thing continue on past the second defamation trial?
What an interesting question. You know, we were talking about that yesterday because of the comments he was making in the courtroom and on Truth Social, as you mentioned. Obviously, there's not an exact kind of double jeopardy, as we say in the criminal sphere, but, you know, you do get close to a line where the legal conflates with the political, and there may not be a bang for the buck as to continue to bring cases because he continues to talk. But it is an interesting sort of law school academic argument because you're right. He's been ordered already liable for the statements he made. Why would you continue to make them?
And real quick, obviously we're waiting for a dollar amount to come out of this. And for example, we saw the $148 million against Rudy Giuliani for defaming the 2 election workers here in Georgia. That's a ton of money. Will they ever actually see a dime of it? So my question to you is, what do you think is going to happen here in terms of dollar amount and whether that money really exchanges hands and under what kind of timeline?
It's a great question because you're not talking about defamation of a normal person, but of a public figure in a sense. You know, remember that the counter argument here that's been made by Trump's attorneys is that, well, was she really harmed by being thrust into the spotlight? Her lawyers would say that's not the way she wanted to be thrust into the spotlight. But you'll notice that in one of the 3 answers the former president gave yesterday, it went to the question of intent. That is something the jury might consider, is that were his comments intended to harm, that was one of the permissible questions of the plaintiff, or was it sort of this byproduct of all of the Trump supporters that jumped on the bandwagon and really ruined her reputation? So it's a very tricky scenario when you have a writer, a very popular opinion writer, that is arguing that she was defamed because the jurors may think, you know, her name wouldn't be a household name were it not for this case. So it's going to be very interesting. Second part, will any money change hands? I would say yes, if in fact down the line this is ordered to be done, because he really has no choice when we get to that point. So I would say yes. However, it may be during the next 4 terms, the next 4 years of a second term presidency. So it may be a long wait for E. Jean Carroll, who, by the way, is now 80 years old. This happened a long time ago.
And just a real quick practical matter. If someone refuses to pay, whether it's Rudy, Trump, whoever in our system, says, no, I'm not, what can the court or the government do to get the money from that judgment, if anything? Can you be forced to pay?
Well, you normally see wage garnishments and seizing of assets. In other words, there are a lot of creative ways that these types of judgments can be enforced, but it looks so bad to the general public if anybody that presumably has the means to pay one of these judgments simply refuses to do so. And for the former president, perhaps soon to be the next president, that's not going to be a good look. So were he to be found liable, he'll appeal the damage results as long as he can, but then eventually one would think he would find the means to pay that.
Trial attorney and legal analyst Wendy Patrick, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.